For more, let's speak to Andrew Lebovich in Berlin from the European Council on Foreign Relations. Hello, and thank you for speaking to France 24. Emmanuel Macron says it's not defeat, but some could argue this is a victory for the junta or even the jihadists. How do you see it?
I don't think it's necessarily a victory for the junta. This still puts them in a difficult situation where they're still going to have to deal with a very complicated, very difficult security and political situation. And also, we've already seen for the transitional government some cracks forming, criticism emerging of their own behavior, some concern about things like rising prices. So this doesn't necessarily make many things easier for the junta itself. For jihadists, what this does mean, and clearly there's going to be less pressure on them, at least after the next several months, and it's going to be harder for French forces, for international forces, to maintain the same counterterrorism posture that they have. So, from a regional perspective, certainly this is worrying, and we'll have to see how France, how the international community adapts their security and political approaches over the next several months. Indeed,
but I want to stay in Mali before we move on to the wider perspective. Real quickly, with France withdrawing, it does allow the ruling junta to enter negotiations with this jihadist. That was something that Paris was adamant against. Do you think that was a right position from the French government, or should they have entertained possible negotiations?
The question of negotiations is a very complicated one, in part because first of all, the French government has largely been opposed to negotiations with the top leadership in jihadist groups, not necessarily some of the local negotiations that have already taken place. But the question of negotiations is really what jihadist groups would be willing to accept that would also be acceptable for any Malian government. So the problem is not necessarily in engaging negotiations or not engaging negotiations. It's actually what the outcome is going to be. And this is where things are much less clear. And just having a negotiations process does not mean in any way that there's going to be a peaceful political resolution that would satisfy all involved.
Okay, and so this decision is that France withdraws from Mali. It will redeploy elsewhere in the Sahel. How is that going to affect the security situation on the ground?
Well, certainly there's going to be a significant reinforcement of security cooperation and the security presence in Niger, partially out of recognition of the better cooperation that exists with Niger's government, but also concern about how insecurity could impact the government. There's also a possibility of deeper collaboration. We've already seen some increased military collaboration with Burkina Faso recently. That also could continue. But of course, one of the major impacts is going to be the shift toward coastal West African states and the open door from France, from Europe, but also from West African states to increased security cooperation.
Yeah, I think there you might be alluding to this threat of jihadists possibly making a push towards the Gulf of Guinea. How real is that threat? Could they go that far?
Well, it depends. Certainly, these groups are present and active in northern Benin, for instance, in northern Côte d'Ivoire. And so that is quite real to the extent that the threat could reach, for instance, Abidjan, Cotonou, or a place like Dakar. That's a bit of a different question, but certainly in the northern regions of these countries, there's a very real threat that is of great concern to the international community, is of great concern to coastal West African states, and will unfortunately likely only continue to get more serious.
Alongside Emmanuel Macron, we saw the presidents of Ghana and Senegal speak, and they were really keen to emphasize more has to be done, whether it's a UN peacekeeping mission, whether it's investment. Is there any concern from regional leaders that Europe might not deliver on its promises?
I don't know if that's quite the issue so much as, especially again for leaders of coastal West African states, for the littoral states, there's really more of a recognition of the security threat and the need to do more and to cultivate a closer relationship with Europe. Now, what's important here is that not only that the international community not neglect the Sahel and move only to a posture that reinforces coastal West African states, but also that we try to at least learn some of the lessons from what went wrong in the Sahel particularly when it comes to issues of governance, local control, civilian protection, the use of militias against jihadist groups, things like that, that we try to avoid some of those same mistakes in states that are now facing a more recent threat from jihadist groups.
All right, Andrew Lebovich. Thank you very much, Andrew Lebovich from the European Council on Foreign Relations.